Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit Quickie from the subreddit HFY, called Strengths and Weaknesses, written by Legal. The link to the original will be down below. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Vanguard Academy on Krasowa Primus, Premier Autocracy Officer Training School. Instructor Tessa Walker watched the class closely. However, she did not speak. She let them sit in silence and stew with worry. She took the time to stretch out her arms out and her wings flap a bit before putting her arms in close and watching for any reactions. Signs of weakness. It was a good instructor who could keep control of their class through an effective use of punishment and occasional reward. But only the truly great instructor like herself, could manage to use silence itself as a weapon. So, it hung in the air like an oppressive cloud, all of them wondering, possibly hoping, that she would just get it over with and tell them what ambush, test, or fatigue would be issued today to make up for some indiscretion or mistake that they had made. Several of them were in varied states of worried perspiration over what she might announce, and a few looked ready to pass out, considering how long they'd been holding their breath. Who could break first? She focused her piercing gaze on the cholera this time. It would do the diminutive pupil good to be reminded of her own failings from time to time. She succeeded too easily to be intellectually portions, having the audacity to question the instructor at times. So she watched the smaller mammal freeze up, and with worry, now that she had to set her focus on the pupil. Valeria just sat there, slowly looking more and more anxious as she didn't breathe until finally gasping out hard with a need for air. What would have normally been such a soft sound nearly filled the void of the silent room as the other pupils looked over at her and the mammal sunk into a seat a little. That's when the instructor smirked and spoke. Today, more worried expressions. We have an opportunity, still worry mixed with unease and confusion, to go on a field expedition. Gasps and sighs filled the room as a collective relief washed over the class. Despite being good news, and in fact a bit of a reward, the instructor felt it was good to unleash a reward upon her class with as much severity and seriousness as a punishment, so that they didn't know ahead of time what to expect. Waving with her wings, she began to direct them to the door as they got up to head out. One of my former pupils has informed me that a recent development in the city. After some recent accidents, it was found that a human might be amongst the general populace here and creating trouble. A human has been caught on our skilled sentinels, of course, and is being held at the courthouse of supreme justice nearby. A real human? She heard some of the pupils murmur in surprise as she began to wave her disciplinary staff at them, as well as herd them all out of the class. Don't sound so surprised. Despite their reputation, they are in fact totally normal mortal beings who live as normally as any of the squalor outside of our borders. The instructor mentioned. It would do us well to see one in the flesh after we spent so long in our class speaking of their philosophy and culture. Is it dangerous? She heard one of the civish students. Of course they are all dangerous in the wild, but I mentioned this one has been subdued and as such should not be of any concern. She assured them, and they began to walk out of the class and through the halls of the academy. There might be some curiosity from the other pupils in the classes as to where the instructor was taking her class. She was known to be unorthodox for autocracy instructor. Sometimes they even whispered suspiciously that she might think exterior to the cube. Of course, do not think that this field expedition will be without learning and testing opportunities as well. The instructor mentioned too many groans as they walked on. Rias described the human physical form. She called out and pointed at the lanky reptile. Bipedal mammal with 2 eyes, 2 arms, 1 mouth, 1 nose, 2 ears, and 1 face. On average 3/4 to a full claw in height. 6 to 8 branches in weight and 5 digits per appendage. Legs that bend back at the knee, of which they only have 1 per leg or arm, the pupil said quickly. Knee per arm? She asked with an arched eyebrow. 1 knee per leg or elbow per arm, the pupil quickly corrected, as he realized he'd made it sound like the humans had knees on their arms for some reason. Finally, though, the instructor nodded. Very good. This puts them very much in the middle of the charts for height and weight. a good quarter claw taller than the Nafrasa, yet a quarter and a half claw shorter than the Chag. They are the closest in size to which the autocracy citizen species, Ayink. The Chang in person gulped as he resisted the urge to immediately cover his head with his hands when the instructor called on him. All the good that would do him, but it would be a moment of respite before she smacked his hands away, then his head, for good measure, should she choose to. Ah, rapturous exponentials? Was the question or an answer, Aink? The instructor asked in her usual icy tone. It's an answer, instructor. The Chag barely managed to say it with enough confidence to stop sounding like a question. Well, you are correct, she replied, and the Chag let out a sigh of relief as his bone-ridged shoulders sagged for a moment. Then the instructor ushered them into one of the Academy exterior extension platforms, though this time it would be descending into the city below. Krasawa Primus was the first colony in the Superilius outside of their own home star, and was very similar, which is why it had been picked. Massive mountain ranges broke up in the landscape into hills and valleys, all the easier for the height of the society to live very literally above the rest. The Academy thus was positioned upon the peak of Mount Tessie, named after the most prominent founding family of the planet, the Instructiox family. She enjoyed the view from the platform as they began to descend down into the main city below them. Stretching out from the Academy was a verdant and healthy-looking valley, with gleaming, opulent domiciles lining the river that bisected the valley. There were also numerous parks, shops, and of course victory arches lining the main concourse before the Academy. Massive statues of the heroes of the autocracy watching over the civilians, moving between their feet like so many little insects. She did think that the view was somewhat spoiled by the sight of some of the tenement burrows dug into the edge of the cliffs in the distance. But she was pragmatic enough to understand that the servants had to live somewhere. However, she reminded herself that this was a time to be instructing and spoke again. Now then, who can tell me what the other attributes of the humans share with our hybrid kin? Average intelligence levels, Qualaria answered, obviously feeling that she needed to make up for breaking first earlier. But the instructor nodded at the small-bodied but large-eared mammal. That's correct. The humans on average are ranked lower on intelligence than Sevish, Nosferod, and, of course, Superilias. Though, as history has proven, both human and exceptionalist intellect isn't deficient, but they do also rank lower than Chag and Superilius. In physical attributes, do they not? Can anyone name a human physical feature that might be close to this divide? Anything unique? She asked and looked around the platform. No one spoke up, so she thumbed her disciplinary staff to make the crest hum with an electrical charge to make it clear that if no one answered, the hitting would start. Their finger claws? The instructor frowned at the pupil Jevai as she swung her staff out to smack it into the Sevish's shoulder, making the reptile gasp and shy away from the electrical discharge. Finger claws! The fact that the human finger nails, she stressed, are the most blunted and pitiful of any such appendage, bone protrusions, while unique, it is not a strength. I'm referring to something that would both make them worthy opponents and important allies to the races that have decided to give them refuge. They're known for being highly adaptable. Of all the success of their offensive infantry Black Ops armor, Vincent started to say before she struck the other Superilius in his back to make him squawk out and flap his wings around a little as he tried to walk off the pain of the discharge. Physical attributes, I said, she screeched. Then the platform came to a stop and she quickly smoothed out her feathers before ushering the students out into the fresh air. They would have to walk under the arch of a complete victory before they would get to the Courthouse of Supreme Justice. There were plenty of citizens walking out in the splendor of the autocracy that day. Superilius executives and administrators, civics technicians and intelligence officers, Nasrastro engineers and naval officers, and the Chag assault leaders, and even some select exponentialists mixed in, though most of their breed were in the slightly lower parts of the city, making up a great deal of the mid-level officials and bureaucrats. Come now, I'll start swinging if I don't get an answer. The instructor reminded them as she used her staff as a walking stick for now. Being in public will not deter me in the slightest. No doubt the various citizens around the concourse were familiar with the sight of cadets in the dark grey and red uniforms being disciplined by the instructyarchs, and wouldn't think anything of it. Endurance? One of the students finally suggested. Yes, endurance. This is something the humans do possess. It is far more difficult to wear them down than most, but this alone will not save them in a fight. What I mean to say is that this line of questioning is that humans overcome physical inferiority with something far more rare and more nebulous, something most often attributed to the superfluous, she said with pride as she raised her beak for a moment. Confidence? Tessa Walker narrowed her eyes, and the pupil book only had a female Chag pupil. If confidence was so unique to our two species, then just how do you suppose that you would have found the confidence to give me the wrong answer? The instructor hissed out and swung her staff around to smack the back of the pupil's skull, causing her to gasp and stagger forward as the shock went straight through her bony armor. It also wasn't a question that I needed any of you to answer. It was rhetorical. Anyone remember what a rhetorical question is? Is that a rhetorical question, instructor? She looked at the Reyes, and the Civis shied away from the gaze as he realized that he had just volunteered. If it's not a rhetorical question, then it's just that, if you can answer it yourself. Tessa Walker arched a brow. I mean, one you don't need to answer from those around you, because you already know it. A question asked so that you can answer it. The instructor narrowed her eyes at the pupil, but kept walking and sighed as she didn't strike him. What I was getting at earlier is that humans and the superfluous possess a far more nebulous trait, superiority of will. We have bound together the autocracy for 1,000 years. We have assembled the great and diverse citizenry to create the galaxy's strongest military. It is our will that allows this. So then it stands to reason that the first species to unite so many inferior species together into the first legitimate threat that we have ever faced would be one of similar superiority of will. Never before did they all dare to stand together as one against us, but now we must deal with the newly formed alliance. Actually, Instructor but Qualeria started to talk, but then gulped down because the silent Tessa Walker leveled her staff at the furry pupil, making her big ears twitch nervously. I believe it was suggested that fingernails played a part in this, for there was another part of their success in pack bonding through scritches. Their success through what? It was a careful emphasis that the instructor put on the word that made the pupils on the platform especially nervous. It was a show that someone could make his word so dire without raising her voice. I read the term in a paper, actually, published by your mother, High Inquisitor Sadis Malheb. Now, nearly terrified pupil muttered as she reflexively curled her tail around her hands to ring nervously. However, at the reference of the instructor actually turned off her staff charge and nodded. You're referring to his early work on the human successful domination, subjugation, and domestication of the lesser species of their homeworld. That's actually true, but I think we can all agree that dominating and subjugating lesser species is a different task entirely than forging alliances with worthy and higher-tier sapients. The way that she said it made it clear to everyone that they had indeed better agree with her, or else. Regardless, here we are. They stood before the courthouse of supreme justice, the towering monolith of combined military firepower, with grand autocratic architecture and traditional superfluous artistic taste. Instructor, so good to see you. Off to one side of the massive structure was a Chag in official dress uniform as an overseer rank enforcer. Pupils, this is Overseer Kerok. The instructor introduced them all. These brave enforcers are the ones who caught the human. Yes, indeed, and I hope that you write me a glowing eval with my superiors once this is done. Right this way. The Chag waved them on to the side entrance of the courtress. I can take you all to the tour of the main facility here, once we're done if you like, from the court arenas to the processing centers, perhaps even the arsenal of the judges. The pupils let out various murmurs as he mentioned a few of the courtress's well-known highlights. Well, we'll see about it if time permits, the instructor said, without committing to anything. Of course. I had the suspect moved to a higher-tier room so that he'd be close by for viewing. The Chag explained as they walked down the immaculate white and red halls. Out of the way of your superiors, idiot! The chair growled out as he shoved a wayward and furious janitor against the wall as the smaller bird squawked in pain and cowered to the side as the pupils passed. But none paid him any more mind once he was out of the way. And here we are. Kirk smiled at the assembled group as he ushered them into the office. There was another Chag enforcer in grunt rank armor besides the exceptionless interrogator specialist armor who snapped to attention when the group entered. Off to the side was the officer's holding cell, complete with a restrained chair and easy-to-clean walls. The elusive human we caught. He smiled and waved at the badly beaten figure held in the chair. "What is this?" the instructor asked with a frown as she pushed her way to the front of the group to look through the cell's window. "That's a human. Bipedal mammal with 2 eyes, 2 arms, 1 mouth, 1 nose, 2 ears, and 1 face. 5 digits per appendage, legs that bend back at the knee, at which they only have 1 per leg or arm. Or, at least they used to only bend one way." He chuckled as he nudged his fellow Chag with his own elbow. "That's a courthouse," she hissed out and waved at the poor Xeno bound to the chair. "No, he isn't. Watch." The Chag moved forward beside the instructor and hit the transmit button in the window. "You're a human, right?" "Yes," the Xeno gasped out in pained voice. "I'm a human. Both my parents are human. I've always been human." When he said that, Kirk gave the instructor a smug look. "See, you're slipping in your old age, instructor," he said as one of her eyes twitched for a moment before she hit the button herself. "So you're a human despite having clammy, slimy flesh, a wider, much more flat features, not to mention teeth befitting a herbivore, and not an omnivore?" she asked, and the Xeno inside hesitated. I'm unwell? I've had the flu? And, I'm simply poor and cannot afford meat," he suggested. "You are not in fact a Quathar, which you look exactly like," she asked next. Look, please, just tell me what you want me to say and I'll say it," he pleaded and whimpered as Tisawaka glared at a former Chag pupil. Well, of course he'd say that. He doesn't want to beating continue. The overseer scoffed as he explained everything. "I'll show you a beating," the instructor screeched into his face as the Chag backed up and raised his hands defensively, despite the fact that he was a full half a claw bigger than her. "Hey, wait now. I'm not your pupil anymore. I'm an overseer. I have subordinates. You can't just beat me because you feel like it. They'll protect me." He looked over at the other enforcers, who were in fact quickly scrambling past the students and out the door of his office. Then he looked back at the instructor with a renewed fear in his eyes as she screeched and squawked while raising her staff. Kirk tried to run, but she just chased him down in the office, smacking him repeatedly as she did. The pupils quickly rushing into the holding cell with the bound Quathar where it was safer. "Waste my time, will you?" Soon enough, Tisawaka was even chasing him down the hall, swinging her staff with precision and skill of an expert instructor. Despite his size and rank, any instructor worth the plumage could strike terror into the hearts of any former pupils after all. They passed by the janitor from earlier as they cowered in the alcove and to avoid being trampled over. Once they passed, he carefully took a small bag of trash and headed to the checkout station for janitors and other sanitation class laborers. He nodded to the various other inferiors that he had passed by before stopping to punch out the main station. "What's in the bag, Dreg?" the overseer exceptionist asked as a bigger Ravian looked down upon the janitor. It was always Dreg of the citizen classes. Dreg, or worse. Only very polite could call themselves a serial number. Discarded food," the janitor muttered, and raised the trash bag to be inspected, but the enforcer just sneered. "Take your lunch and get out. Filthy little scavenger." He growled, but the janitor just nodded and quickly scurried out. From the quarters laborers' entrance, he scurried off away from the quarters and underground into the maintenance tunnels. Citizens got to take trams or even sky gondolas, but servant classes just got to ride the rickety underground conveyors amongst the crates, packages, and other basic goods shipped around the city. Clinging to a crate, he rode out the conveyor to one of the final stops, and he had to hop off and roll as he hit the platform, but he made it. From there, he scurried in with more haste up to the lower levels of the tenement boroughs. They lived down amongst the machinery that provided clean water and electricity for the rest of the city, where it was hot, humid, and harsh to live. But he didn't care about that as much anymore. As he had approached the hidden basement den, he checked over his shoulder many times with worry. But no one was watching. Why would the autocracy waste anything on watching the lowest of the low? What could they know? The enforcers and inquisitors were reserved for scientists, engineers, generals, and admirals, not janitors. He tapped on the pipes and, like always, was worried that it wouldn't work. Then he'd just be living through the most wonderful dream of his life. That none of this was real, but the secret door eased open and he quickly pushed through before it closed behind him. He looked around the den to see the other inferiors guarding it, nervously clutching a crowbar, just about the most advanced weapon that they had. Then he stepped further into the den to the core. There were pillows and sleeping inferiors scattered all around, with a special honored guest at the center. The very reason he feared he was living in a dream. Mary! Mary! He scurried towards her with excitement as she stroked the head of another slumbering inferior on her lap. Shh! She gently shushed him with a finger to her lips as he quickly became quiet. She gently slipped the head from her lap and then got up from the massive sleeping avians around her to step over and then sit upon the pillow where she gave up her lap a pat. I have more classy scribbles and something exciting to me. Something special, maybe. He told her full excitement to make her happy. Shh, Tavish. Let me welcome you back first. I'm sure you had a long day at work, but let me soothe you. Then you can tell me all about your day. Reward before all else. She soothingly told him as he curled up on a pillow beside her, setting his head on her lap and happily as she slowly and carefully cradled his head in her hands. She called him by his name. She always did. Never his number, never anything mean. He liked that. But what he loved was the way that her fingers slowly scratched along his beak, through his feathers and along his throat. The avian felt the stress and fear of the day melt away, worries about getting caught and being discovered completely fleeing his mind. She took her time and slowly scratching his head, giving him a gentle and soothing contact that he had never found anywhere else. Once they were very nearly falling asleep himself, did she speak up once more. Okay, Tivy, can you tell me about your day? But relax. You're amongst friends here, you know, among your flock. I'm part of your flock, aren't I, Tivy? Yes, he softly sighed out. Human flock, best flock. He murmured as the human smiled down at him and slowly let her fingernails scratch through his feathers in a way that claws could never match. So tell me what you learned today. She encouraged, then knowing that while generals, admirals, scientists, and engineers all closely guarded their secrets and what they said, no one paid attention to the scraps that they threw away, or what they said around those who took the trash away. A weakness that played straight into her strength. Scritches.